All right, and there we go. We are live. Hi, everybody who is either watching this live or catching it after the fact. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am joined by my good friend Tori. There we go. Haha, I got it right the first try. And we are going to be interviewing Andrew D. Meredith, author of these fantastic books. Not all of them, just these specific ones. Yeah, those. And that is Thrice, which is Needle and Way, right? Oh, Needle and Leaf. I was so close. Needle and Leaf,
yeah.
And Collation. Feel free to introduce yourself. Going to kind of just
you pronounced
have
it
a nice
right.
little
Collation.
Chat.
You've been practicing.
That's because I've been eavesdropping on your live chats.
Sure. That's fine. Yeah. So I'm the author of both Leaf and Needle. Yeah, you said Calatean for a while, and let's be honest, that's how it's spelled. So I'm the author of Needle and Leaf and the Collation Saga, which currently, as of today, has 2 books out, both Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud. And long as everything goes right, books 3 and 4 will be out this next year too.
That's awesome. That is fantastic. Okay, now, because you've gone ahead and introduced yourself, I'm also going to give Tori a special shout out for coming through in a pinch. Everybody, if you're watching this, please, I not only have Tori's channel linked down below, so make sure to subscribe to her, but I've also got links to all 3 of these books through Silverstone, the Silverstone links in the description down below. So with that said, we can now jump into the interview. Oh, and we've got a couple friendly faces.
Juicy Gum, Pete.
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
Hey, Joe.
And Pete wants to know himself. We made the joke backstage, Pete, that Tori could change her name to Nico.
I could.
But one thing I do want to start off by asking you, Andrew, is I noticed it was either on Insta or Twitter. I follow you everywhere. Not every one of the social media platforms. I'm not in your backyard right now. Is you posted this thing, and it looked like a whole lineage for Collation.
Yeah.
Like you had built out a royal lineage, and you're just like, did I need it? No. But did I do it? And can you kind of explain to me the thought process behind that?
Yeah, so I don't remember when I first did it. I think I've done like 3 versions of it over like the last 15 years, but it's just the royal lineage of the one non-human race that has a long history, a 2,000-year-old history of kings from beginning to end. And I don't know, I was feeling probably like not writing at the time, and so I instead world build and ended up figuring out how long does each king live, how long did they reign, and then it just kind of snowballed from there because they are a much shorter lived people, and so lots of kings. But it also gave me some good I think like I had to figure out who was king 70 years ago, and I'm like, hey, why not do all 2,000? And it just happened. I kind of tripped and fell into it.
So you just tripped and fell. So does that kind of inform on how you write your stories? You may not need that lore, but it helps enrich the world. It makes it feel more real.
Yeah. I don't do that nearly as often as I used to, because you can fall into a really easy trap of what's called just world building syndrome. And world builder syndrome is where you just never get to writing because all you're doing is writing all the world building. And well, yeah, but what happens if an election is thrown? Is that going to happen in the book? Probably not. So starting about 2017, I stopped trying to do so much just heavy world building and only stop and do it when it's necessary. So comes to, I do need to know who the king is 70 years earlier. I'm going to sit down and figure that out backwards. I'm not going to figure out now 10,000 years of kings for one nation. Not to say I wouldn't like to, but if it's more important to write the book at times and look at what the tip of the iceberg is, rather than trying to build it all, because you can't build it all, right? You're stuck with a hollow iceberg that has some ice that's thick and the rest of it's hollow. If all you do is work on a portion of the world building as you need it, it actually fleshes out better than it could if you just try to make it up out of your, pull it out of your butt. So,
and as Kevin says, it is release day for Bone Shroud. So
Yes.
again, happy release day. And again, as I said in the description box down below, I have links to Silverstone's books, where you can buy all 3 of Andrew's books. And then that is the chime that's saying somebody has opened the garage door. I wish I could turn it off. I can't.
I love Pete's comment.
help! I've So, one of the things that I love about the way that you write is, and it's funny because I've talked about this before, and we've actually had conversations where I was reading Thrice, and you're like, "Oh, how did you feel about that one scene?" And I was just like, "What are you talking about?" And you had to go back 3 plot points and be like, "This happened, this happened." I'm like, "Oh, like I've just been sitting here experiencing your story and not worrying about what's going on. I'm not committing that to memory. I'm just sitting down." It's like that, stereotypical feeling to me when I read your books of like the fireplace is roaring. I've got my I've got the cat in my lap. I've got a comfy book. My kids are being quiet. They're off playing by themselves. I don't know why they're a part of this analogy. And then just reading a book and experiencing it. And so I love the way that you write like that.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that you do to kind of achieve that feel? Like, what do you consciously focus more on story versus character and plot? Or like, I want to pick your brain on that because I wish more people would do this.
Yeah, I am a heavy outliner, which outlining alone can tend to be a little bit more stiff. But by heavy outline, it's only because I spent like 6 months just figuring out what my particular beat rhythm is for my writing style. And that's about 1,000 words a beat. And a beat is like, at what point is there a change? Is there a shift? So I have 1,000 words. That's a lot. I mean, that's double blog post, right? So there's time to say stuff and take your time to say what you need to say. So when I write my outline, I just do like 1-line bullet points of here's the things that need to be accomplished. I stopped plotting any kind of conversations. I just keep a running list of things I want to have been said at some point because they'll often happen so much earlier than I planned. But by doing that, it gives me time to just, I know it's going to take about 1,000 words to get this much done. What happens in those 1,000 words? Let's find out. So there's a bit of discovery writing, but it isn't a snowball discovery writing where I'm just running all the time. It's I have 1,000 words. If I can get this 1,000 words done, I can go to work and stop writing and go to work if I need to. And chances are I'll keep writing. And so I think that's why, is because I've set myself a pace. And so at 1,000 words, or in the case of Thrice, it's 1,000 words, but all of the chapters are about 1,000 words smaller than I normally write. So you tend to have to get more done, but also still at that leisurely pace.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've never actually heard like that kind of approach. Now I know your wife is also a writer. Does she use the same approach, or does she do her own thing?
She's an outliner, but she's a chaotic outliner. So
outliner.
Yeah. So like linear, the whether you're chaotic or lawful, I'm a lawful outliner. She's a chaotic outliner.
Going into D&D, I like it.
So she writes backwards. She writes mystery. So she figures out the solution and then works her way backwards in her outline. But then she writes wherever she wants. So she'll write this scene that's 80% of the way through, and then go back and write a scene from the opening scene, and then it all comes together once she lays it out. Yeah. So she doesn't have one, but in her head, I'm sure there's like strings all over the board inside of her mind palace, and she's just following each string, and then it all creates the map.
I'm just picturing the Charlie Day meme.
Yeah.
And she's up against the wall. It all makes sense. It all connects.
Yep.
What about you, Tori? Because Tori, I know you're a writer as well. How do you do it?
It's hilarious that you bring that up. Actually, Andrew and I have had long conversations about writing process. I am very chaotic when it comes to, like, I can manage an outline, but it's like pulling all my hair out. I like the discovery writing where I kind of in my head know where I'm going, but I don't. If I have to stop and sit down with an outline and write it out, then I get bored. And then I don't want to write the actual manuscript, if that makes sense. So yeah, I have a lot of admiration for people that put that much work into outlining, because I don't know how they do it.
Perfect. So we've got actually a pretty cool opportunity here because Tori, you have read Thrice, and
Yes.
I have read Thrice and Collation, and
Yes.
we've got the author on the chat. So Andrew D. Meredith, how would you sell Collation to somebody who's already familiar with your work,
Sure.
but you want to read Collation?
All right, so you've read Thrice and you're looking for a new book. You want a book that is approachable, clean, and you could read it and hand it to any one of your relatives safely. Right? So it's going to be an epic. It's not going to be a hard sell for you to sit down and they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, is there's suggestive problems in here? No. It's going to be an epic. Is it going to be a classic epic? Yeah, probably. Is it going to be a classic epic? My wife and I always joke about the difference between classic and classic. I wouldn't say it's a classic, it's a classic, right? It's got that style of classic without the cringe, I would think. I would hope. And it's going to be an epic story that is going to, have multiple point of views, which a lot of the old epics didn't. They were single POVs for the most part. So you're going to get a little bit of modern in that. And that's not a short pitch that I just gave you at all, but it's a start.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And if I'm
it is a long
remembering
form, though.
From a previous chat you had with Tori, Collation 16 books?
Yes, but let's call it 2 groups of 8.
Two groups of 8.
Yes, I'll be doing. I guess I could say 4 groups of 4, but that would be stupid. It's 2 groups of 8. You'll get a break after each 4, like 6 months to a year. Big break. But I'm gonna give you. I'll give you a little bit of a break at the end of each 4. You'll be at a place where you can say, okay, I'm gonna go read Tori's books now.
So let's talk about the thought process that went into. Oh, I should have put these up too. Between these, which you originally sent me. I love these, by the way.
Thank you.
And then what? If it helps, if I hold it up correctly. So these are the exact. If I can get it into frame, there. Move that over, Andrew. Okay.
Yeah.
So these are the exact same thing. What made you decide to do the format change?
Yeah. So there have been a lot of format changes over the last 5 years. So just to do a 60-second overview. Both books, Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud, were one book when I first wrote them in 2017. And they were about the size of one of those books at 170,000 words or so. And I was pitching it out to agents and doing the traditional thing. And then I had a dream of figuring out how to turn it into 2 books and give more attention to each half. And I did that so that I could shoot for half of it now, half of it later. Well, when it came time to finally switching over to becoming an indie author, because 2020 happened and I had time to figure out how to do it, I said, right now, looking at the 2019 market, people want a book as fast as they can, as often as they can, lots of little books, 50,000 words. Mm-hmm. So 20 books out, I'll buy all 20. It's like, hey, okay, I'll shoot for 20 books. I can do that. Then SBFBO happened. I entered SBFBO. I met the true indie culture.
Community. Yeah.
Yes, and we all want books that are as big and fat and chunky as the ones we buy at the store, right?
Right.
Yes, a 50,000 word series is fun and all if you're reading Jules Verne, but can I maintain that? And there's also the issue of if someone read Bonds of Promise, which was the first little book one, do they even continue on? Or I'll get around later to Deeper Faith. And it's like, but I want you to be committed. And you really get committed after you've read what is Deathless Beast now. It gives you enough of a commitment that you're like, okay, that's a satisfying ending. Bonds of Promise ends with the end of part 1. Yeah. So it wasn't satisfying enough. And so I said, you know what? I could wait and do this 2 years from now. Mm-hmm. Why am I not doing it right now and spending the time to retrain those who had started, which was only a select few, as opposed to trying to retrain 2 years worth of readers to accept a book as a single volume. So
okay, that makes sense. I can see the argument for both sides. Like, don't get me wrong, like doing nice like bite-sized stuff is great, but I feel like, if it's the big beefier version, I'm likely to retain more and be driven to complete more.
Yeah. And
then, once you've read the beefy book, you kind of you're then invested in the series at some point.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to I can see the thought
And
process.
add to that, it's 3 different point of views, right? And Deeper
Yeah.
Faith follows 2 of them, and it's such a huge shift over to a totally new point of view that, well, what's the point? Where do they actually come together? Well, they don't come together till number 3, and so it just ends up being too far out before you have solid investment. Yeah.
Yeah. Which it's very interesting while reading Deathless Space. Actually, let's do an aside, because Dean basically said, love the audios, which you do your own audiobooks, and for this and for Thrice, and it helps pronounce the names and the locations and the locales and the orders and things of that nature. Is that kind of why you wanted to do your own audiobook, to get the pronunciations correct, so you didn't have to teach somebody else how to do it? You could just jump in and be like, hey, I know how to say it. This is how it's done.
Yeah. I'm never going to push on somebody how they have to pronounce a name, because it just happens. I mean, I pronounced Riva from Bulgariad as Rivia for 5 years as a kid, because and Witcher didn't exist back then. So it wasn't me mixing the two. I just put an I in there, and so that's what I saw. So, okay, mispronunciation is up to the person. But then I also spent the last 3-4 years listening to audiobooks and saying, I could probably do better than this. And
you do a great job with the narration.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it could have been terrible, and I was willing to take that risk and try, because I told my wife, the worst that happens is I lose 1 month of my life.
Right.
And I did actually lose a month of my life, because I had to re-record Thrice a second time to get it down. So I did lose a whole month, but it was because I hit the end of the month and I was like, oh, now I know what I'm doing. This is turning out pretty good. Let's do it again. And I'm so glad I did.
Huh. Well, I'm going to take a drink and let Tori talk.
Okay. Yeah, it was going back to the thought of different lengths of books and stuff. When I'm reading through, I love the big chunker books, because when you really fall in love with a world and the characters, we want as much of it as we possibly can get, right? So that's why, once you find writers you love and styles you love, it's really easy to commit to those longer series, because you just don't want them to end. You want to stay in the world and see where the characters go until 8 generations down the line. But what I really like is finding shorter books that I can put in between those reads, so it breaks it up a little bit. And I think that's one of the things I love about what a lot of the indie authors are doing now. With they've got the series and then they drop novellas in between, which is lovely, because then you get like little bite-sized chunks in between these much bigger reads.
Yeah. One of my favorite series that does that, and unashamedly, it's the Kate Daniels series, by Alona Andrews. It's urban fantasy, post-apocalyptic romance. I don't even care. Tons of little novellas, side novels, spin-off series. They've created this whole little universe, and it's just great to dive in. There's now a sequel series. It's awesome. Great stuff. I want to see more authors do that. So now, Andrew, you have to give me more novellas.
I'm trying. I have a couple things I'm working on. We'll get there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
One of them's super weird though, and I don't know how it's gonna land.
Hey, that just take a risk. Go for it. Yep. What's the worst that's gonna happen?
I will have written the thing that I want to write for myself, and no one reads it. And that's okay.
Yeah. Megan's loves your aesthetic.
Thank you. Hobbit at heart here.
I have one of those hats, but like I thought I looked cool in it in the 20s, and then like in my 20s, and then I realized like nah, I don't.
Just gotta lean into it.
Off. Yeah, I don't have the big enough beard for it.
I definitely don't.
Yeah, no. You know what? They make those knit caps that have the beard kind of.
Yeah, I should get one.
Yeah. Oh, you totally should. Okay. Anyway, that's a thought for another time. So the Clows. I saw you post on Twitter that you've got some origin story information about the Clows, and this is kind of something I think would be good to wet the whistle of potential collation readers like Tori or people in the chat. Can you give me kind of the origin stories and some of their info and how the kind of their order came about? I believe it's the Black Merchants. No,
I got the Black Sentinels.
Black Sentinels.
Not to be confused with the Sentinels of Averin.
Right.
Different Sentinels.
So they, I mean, they have not led a very exciting life. Their father was a netmender. They have two different mothers. Hannah's died in childbirth, and then he ended up marrying the wet nurse after that, and they had Ralia. And he's a luckless man who has done almost nothing has ever gone right for him at all. And he apprenticed them out to, I think, a cheesemonger who would move cheese up and down the continent. Only it turned out he was actually smuggling jewelry and valuable goods for the rich to move
inside the cheese.
Yeah, because and you put it in the cheap cheese, right? Because if you get pulled over, you give them the expensive stuff.
Oh, that's actually I remember that line.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
And exactly. So he was smuggling legal goods for the rich between towns, and they were apprenticed to him. From that, Hannah learned how to run, a book from that. And they did end up getting set upon by the wrong people. He dies, and they don't know what to do with their lives, and end up overhearing a group of bandits, probably the same ones, if I'm honest. I have to write the story still. And they figure they're just going to turn the tables on them. And in doing so, they end up saving somebody, including that person's bodyguard, who is Cern Vitura's. Cern Vitura's takes them on as a Black Sentinels, takes them to the big city of Eddy, which is basically Venice, but without the canals. And then says, all right, you're on your own now. Because that's how all Black Sentinels work. It's just a name to be a Black Sentinel. You pay your tithes upwards to be able to wear the cloak. And then as you get the higher rank, you can then call out for higher pay, because you'll be backed by the Sentinel organization because you're a Sentinel. So it's really more union than actual guild. And they said, this is stupid. Why are we picking up contracts every day? Let's just set up an office and pool together a bunch of Sentinels so we can charge more per person and make more, or make less per person to make more per Sentinel. And then they just started just walking up and down the continent, 3-4 times a year, and making a ton of money at doing almost nothing. Because once you have a huge show of force, then nobody pulls you over. So there's no worry about bandits.
Yeah, so it's funny because going about through all of that, like, earlier on in the chat, you mentioned like building back all that history and giving like your characters clear origin stories. So I think a lot of the modern, and I could be wrong on this, I could be completely off base, a lot of modern, like truly modern fantasy kind of introduces the character and then lets you discover who they are and builds out that lore as the story goes on, versus doing it on the back end and then letting it shine through.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I love about the way you write Collation and the way you write Thrice. Like just in meeting Joven, the second you meet Joven, you realize that there's some history behind this guy, and there's something there that you need to learn about him because he's so compelling. He's such an odd character. He's a needle maker. Who writes stories about a needle maker who is a better blacksmith than the blacksmiths, because he's like, I've got a very specific set of skills.
Yeah.
I will
Did you ever read Bone?
I will make needles for you.
Did you ever read Bone, the comic book?
I've read some Bone.
There's the huge tavern keeper who's always flirting with Granny. That's basically who Joven was.
It's been 14 years.
I just wanted a giant of a man working on little needles. It was just an inside joke for myself, and I ran with it.
It works.
I was going to say there's this character isn't like the other girls. Joven isn't like the other Smiths.
Yeah. In that he totally is.
Yep.
Yeah. And then of course, like, because you've got all that history, the way you write the stories, it becomes very day in the life of these characters set within a fantasy world. So you're experiencing a fantastical world through people where it's just every day. Yeah. Including with plants called Grief Dark.
I'm still trying to make that shirt. I'm not there yet.
Yeah. It's funny. The first critique I ever gave him was I start Bonds of Promise, and it's like the first paragraph, and he's like grief dark, and I'm like, what is grief dark? Like I'm just like I don't. It's like, is that a time of day? Is this like afternoon? Is this like And he's just like, no, it's a plant, man. And I'm like, what? And then I read 3 pages more, and I'm like,
Good grief, Dark.
oh man. But you should totally make a shirt that says "Good Grief Dark."
Yeah,
That would be amazing.
Yep.
Yes. So how many books do you have planned for Thrice? That series.
3/5.
3/5.
So
I like a good hedged answer.
Yeah, so it'll be a trilogy. It'll be a trilogy.
Okay.
Which will be Thrice, Fourscored, and Fife and Drum will be the 3 books. When you finish book 4, you'll probably be begging me to write the 2 prequels.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I had an idea I would write 2 prequels, and then I wrote book 4, and I was like, oh man, that's what's going to happen in those 2 books. Oh, this is going to be great. So there's some things that happen in the last third of Fourscored that they beg for 2 more books. So I'll take a break between the trilogy and the 2, but and yes,
a Joven prequel, correct?
A Joven, yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
That makes me that pleases me greatly.
Yeah. It'll be his apprenticehood and his journeyman eras.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That'll be good. That'll be good. All right, I feel like I'm talking over Tori and not like giving you a chance to speak. Like I panic reached out to you and was like, please join me. A, I wanted to collab, and B, like
because I totally hate hanging out talking books with my favorite Andrew. And
wait. I
played the 5th.
All right.
Wait. Whoa. Hey, just because I've caused some trouble in the comment section, okay?
I have said nothing about raisins.
For some serious payback here, but I won't because I'm too nice.
Oh, geez. So, let's talk about cover art, because cover art is something. So I remember when you were starting
controversy now. Here we go. Yep.
Huh?
Let's go into controversy. Let's do it.
Controversy.
Yep.
Okay, so when we're doing Bonds of Promise, I liked this. I thought that these were cute. I love the kind of pocketbook things. You then showed me the concept where you were going to take some art and like leave the logos.
Yeah.
And then you kind of ditched that idea, and then that became Deathless Beasts. And I just kind of want to know the process and the controversy behind that.
Well, I will say, after today, if I had known Sparrow Springs a year ago, it would have changed the covers for Bonds of Promise. Seeing the cover she did for AR with them, because that's what I wanted, was the idea of like that Game of Thrones icon item.
Mm-hmm.
Tried it on my own. It's okay. I'm not the best Photoshopper when it comes to just putting something together. When it comes to icons like that, right? And Sparrow Springs, fantastic. I just can't. It just wasn't hitting. It wasn't hitting for everybody. You know, a few people like yourself were like, "Oh man, no, this is great. I love it. It's simple. It's great." It just wasn't hitting. I cannot afford to pay for a cover artist. And the controversy is that I photo bashed and created, both of these, and I'll probably continue for a while, by putting together assets from AI generations.
Okay.
So it is an AI art book, not like the one that's been the real controversy online, where they literally they barely did anything to it. They just did a prompt and put it on.
Are you talking about the Malazan one?
Yep, that one.
Okay.
I can look at that and go, oh yeah. Yeah, not to name names.
Malazan is big enough. It'll be fine.
Exactly. They chose to take that risk. It was a silly risk because I think that they probably overpaid too for somebody to just put one generator in, do some polish, and call it good.
Mm-hmm.
I did use AI, but it's photo bashed in that there's 10 different groups of generations in here, from my figures to the Deathless Beast to the sky to the background to filtering over it. So using a lot of the tricks that you do when you're doing photo bashing, just instead of using an asset that I purchased from a photo bash company, I generated them on AI and put them together using that work. So the controversy is as AI is terrible. No one should ever use AI. My controversy with that is that our parents said the internet would never happen and it was going to be a fad.
Right.
And it could be the AI will be a fad as well. But somebody said, yeah, but what if we invented this thing called Jeeves and then Google and now we're here just, uploading cat photos. So yeah,
So
but it's still here.
It's weird. I mean, we can go off on this tangent a little bit, a little bit. I say, I don't see the controversy, especially so if you're in the traditional market and you've got the big budgets and like you have the money to do that. That is fine. I've talked to a lot of self-pub authors, and a lot of them, money is tight. It is expensive AF to put out a book. I mean, just through proofreading, editing, art, formatting, just everything that goes into it.
Yeah.
I can understand the appeal. And then like, I mean, even if you were to take this and like update the covers later, you have that option.
I want to. Yeah.
Yeah, that is fine. To me, that is perfectly fine. If you plan to eventually, hire an artist, that, more power to you. You've got to take care of you and yours, especially, I mean, the way things are these days, like costs are going up, cost of living's going up. Like if you want to get your story out there, and I mean, these look fine. They look good. I like these covers. I actually really like the font. I'm a huge fan of the font. Yeah, I didn't even know that they were AI or photo bashed, whatever that term is. If you can afford an artist, more power to you.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's nothing wrong with those.
Yeah. I'm a big advocate for as an author, you're your own publisher, right? And you got to decide where your shortcomings are and how you're going to shore them up. You should have somebody else edit your book at some point. Do you have to have it edited at every level? Depends on the author and depends on what you can afford. It's different for everybody. Some people, not naming names, JCM, are editing their books constantly and re-updating. That's fantastic, right? That Jim is putting up a brand new, and it automatically goes out to everybody who's bought the book on when you buy it off of Kindle. So the fact that he's fixing things and adjusting things constantly is like, this is fantastic. This is great, because someone's going to come along in a year from a publisher and say, hey, I'm going to buy this guy's books because they're so clean. Would he have done that a year earlier? Who knows? But it's a lot cleaner now than it was. So he knows that, okay, it's going to need some work. Same with me. I can't afford an artist. So I'm going to have to do what I can. And then when I do have the money, I'm like, I've got an asset I'm very, very likely going to have Sarah make for me, because I cannot make AI won't do it. It just won't do it. And so I need it. So I'm going to pay for that, because I want my covers to look as awesome as these first two. And that also requires that it is the thing that I've got in my head. So,
hey, I mean, when it comes to covers, do what you can.
Yeah.
That's all a reader and a collector can ask. If it looks good on the shelf, then, I mean, at least the spines are consistent.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking on book 4 though, since it'll be slightly longer. I might go ahead and make that one an inch shorter.
Don't.
Please do it.
I'm gonna make one just to send to you.
Yes, because then he'll have a limited edition book, but it'll drive him crazy.
Is it a limited edition or a limited edition?
I don't want it. Oh no, that sounds, that you're giving me anxiety. It was funny when Trudy Sky, she was able to fit it in the same size hardcover, but like she tweeted out, she's like, "Is it going to be a problem if it's a different size?" And I was just like, "No!" Oh, geez. Okay, Slavic. Let's talk Slavic, because it's still something I'm a little hazy on.
Sure.
Would you care to expound on what Slavic fantasy is and how it differentiates from that European garbage? I'm just kidding.
Right. So when I say European, most of us automatically go to English, French, German. That's it. Maybe Italian. Okay. Well, no, that's Renaissance only, right? Okay, we got Italian. maybe Spain, but isn't that that's all of Europe, right? No, that's not. It's only a third of Europe. Even Scandinavia added in is a third of Europe. There's still 2/3 of actual landmass to the east, right? Yugoslavia on through to Russia and on. So Slavic it tends to capture all of that, except it doesn't, because you're looking at both Balkan and the Baltic states up north, but they all have a lot of the same non-Catholic background because they have a more of an Eastern Orthodox background, which has a very different mythology as well that maybe has some runnings in with, Black Forest in Germany and some of the Scandinavian, but it is different and it has a different feel to it. Just like if I say a Norse a Norse is very different from a European, there is a difference. And then of course Celtic, so there's lots of different ways we can parse it all out. But the idea of the dark but not German Polish Witcher is Polish, so that falls in that Eastern European. But Eastern European is just such a long word. I don't want to say Eastern European fantasy when I could say Slavic.
Fair enough. So what different elements can people expect within that style of fantasy?
A lot. It tends to act a lot darker in an accepted darkness. Like there is darkness out in the forest. We can go out there. We can face it, and it might come into the village and kill us. What are you going to do? So there's a little bit of a nihilism kind of built into that. I don't tend to write very nihilistic myself, but it's kind of that acknowledgement of the acceptance that there is Fae, right? There's Fae out there and it can be faced, and maybe it exists beside us, maybe it doesn't, versus I think probably when you head more towards the west, it's more, there's Fae and we should burn it. You're like, so, well.
Light it on fire!
Yeah. So I think that's probably more of an acceptance of the mythical.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So we kind of talked about the Black Sentinels, and then there's another order of like paladins, and there's two different kind of sides to this religious order. What kind of went into making that?
I really wanted to write paladins that felt lived in, that their order felt like they were feet in the boots. A lot of, I tend to get turned off by a lot of paladinial orders when they're in a game. If it's in Warcraft, it's paladins. It's just a game. Who cares? But I see a lot of that sometimes will bleed into other fiction where we're paladins and we follow the light. And it's like, well, what's the light? Well, it's the light. It's like, yeah, but what's the light? And so I tried to really flesh that out, and like what are they following? Who are they following? How is it different? How do you play with a multi-god based system, right? Where it isn't, well, we should just burn the other church down because their god's fake. And it's like, no, these ones are literally appearing all the time. And how much does that play out in? It does in RPGs, but then it's like, well, no, they're the chaos group, so let's just go burn them down. It's like, well, what if they all exist? So it's kind of a given that happens. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it was an enjoyable read, that it hit all the good notes, and also was familiar enough to everybody without without going too far extreme of a straw man or straight to everything's Inquisition. So I was trying to find that good happy medium somewhere in between there, and drawing off a lot of history to do that too.
Yeah.
I just forgot I had the background off. I fixed it, and I was listening. I promise. Oh, geez. Okay, so
I have a question too.
Yeah.
I think I tend to be drawn toward very like action heavy books, which is shocking to no one who knows me. But I also really love, like, there's kind of, to me, there's a difference between really good writers and really good storytellers. And I think that kind of goes back to what Wizard was talking about earlier with, you're sitting in front of a fire and that old tradition of someone sitting and telling everyone a story, and there's this kind of magic in it all by itself of this build of this story and the world around it. So what do you think is really the draw for, because I feel like action books, like it's easy to explain why we get sucked into those, right? It's happening so fast and everything's like super high stakes the whole time. So what is the draw for you as an author in writing those really, you know, beautiful storyteller kind of books?
Probably falls into a lot of the same things of the battle, right? The battle is built to draw you in, and
Right.
when you look back up from the book, you're like, oh my gosh, it's been an hour. Where did that time go? And
Yep.
and maybe you're a little stressed too, just like when you're reading any thriller book too, right? They're short, but afterwards, man, you're stressed out because that's the point. It's supposed to bring you to panic mode and carry you through, and at the very end it drops you out because it's solved, but you got to look back and go, I'm so glad it's not my life, right?
Right.
Well, with fantasy, it's escapism, right? We're not trying to read and then escape from the book like a Stephen King novel, right? But we want to really immerse ourselves, right? And get in there and enjoy it and look up and go, okay, yeah, that was fun. You know, I mean, that's one of the advantages to reading a Brandon Sanderson book is you can put it down every chapter, which the chapters are 300 pages long, and be like, oh, that was a good chapter. And he wants you to put it down. And I want you to put my books down, not having finished them, but go, okay, I have something to think about, and come back later. And you're still kind of in that. How can I draw you into flow state? Right.
Right.
I mean, that's the storyteller. I want to take you into flow state with me.
Yep.
And afterwards we'll put the book down together. We'll hold hands. We'll sing a song, and and you'll come back later for more.
Well, and I think that kind of goes, we talked a little bit, was that yesterday, about the idea of moments of normalcy in books and how important those are for the reader to immerse with the characters and really have those. These are like real people doing real things in that kind of everyday life, which again, Wizard mentioned earlier, is a big factor in your books, that these people feel like you're just walking alongside their everyday lives, which I think is honestly a really tough thing to accomplish as a writer. So it's one of the things I'm really looking forward to in Deathless.
Well, yeah, one of the things that, like, you know, building off of that and kind of revisiting what I said earlier, is like, it's typical in fantasy, like, you're in the thick of it, you're in the battle, like, your protagonist is awesome, they can bench 300 pounds with their nose, you know, something silly, or they're like always super vulnerable, or they're super psychologically damaged, and you can tell you're reading a character. You can tell that this person, while that character may be compelling, while that character may be interesting or humorous, or, you know, they may make you feel and react to something, sometimes, and I'm not going to say all the time, they don't feel like people. They feel like a character. And most of the time, I would say you are incredibly successful in Collation and in Thrice, where these feel like people. They feel like you could sit down, ask them about their day, and you could reasonably understand the response you're going to get, and just talk with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I enjoy it so much. It's funny because I'm sitting here trying to think of specific scenes, and I can't think of scenes. I only think of moments.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a little bit how my memory works in real life. Like, I don't picture my memories as scenes. I picture of what happened at that specific moment that went into my long-term memory.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're talking about my wife about you know, what happens when, I mean, I homeschooled for the second half of my of school. In the first half, I was in elementary. What do you remember of elementary? You remember that moment the teacher made you go sit out in the hall because you were distracting. You remember that moment where you asked your best friend in kindergarten because you just met him, hey, want to be best friends? And now you're best friends. I have no other memories of him, but I remember that moment of us leaning against the same tree, turning around and going, hey, you don't have a friend. Want to be my best friend? Yes. And it just happened. Well, that's a memory. It's a core memory at that point. And yeah, so it's that is those moments where you don't remember the teacher telling you how to do multiplication.
No.
You know how to do multiplication, but you don't remember how you learned it, because that's not a memory. That's just data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I flow through Collation, and I mean, one of the best honors I've ever had is you putting me on the back of the book. But like there is something about the way that you write that you just experienced these stories. I absolutely love it. What is your end goal for Collation? Now, I'm not asking you to spoil. I'm not asking you to spoil story. I'm asking what, as an author and a writer, do you want to achieve with the series?
Probably a lot of what you're saying. That you look back and see all those. You don't remember. Maybe you remember the plot, but you remembered several moments of your favorite character, and even of characters who are not your favorites or characters you really, really hate, Dane, and
I knew it.
Yeah, and others who write grimdark, Tori, you're looking to emotionally damage people, and there are times where I'm looking to emotionally damage people by not being grim. Like I love humperdinking my villains. I mean, you've read Thrice.
Humperdinck is the worst.
Humperdinck lives.
I hate Humperdinck.
Humperdinck
so
lives. and that's enough emotional damage for me to give you, is if I can make you go back and go, ugh, he didn't do the one thing.
Yeah.
But
well,
you still loved it. So.
If I can speak to that a little bit, I think one of the things that I think, despite the fact that you and I write in very different styles and like, I don't know if I'd say emotional planes, but kind of, that I think one of the things that I would totally agree with is that you don't get the most emotional impact with your readers in those moments of high intensity, high action. It's in those quiet moments in between and after that you really like, that's where it happens.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like the difference between writing Snape and writing Umbridge, right?
Right.
They're two very different people, and you love, some people love one and everybody hates the other one. I don't have to name names.
I can't imagine who.
Yeah.
I mean,
we're toying with our readers' emotions in very different ways, but in the end, kind of the same, right? Yeah. Because in the end, we are toying.
Yes.
Well, I think that's I think that's a lofty goal, honestly. Yeah. And then of course you had to bring up Dane, and I'm not gonna go into spoilers. Dane is an interesting character because even though he is a giant pain in the backside, at times he's not that hateable. And then it's only when he, like, he's off by himself and he decides to open his mouth that you're just like, oh yeah, you still suck. Okay, cool. And it's interesting because usually, like I said, most people feel like a character, and it's like, oh, they're this kind of person. Yeah. Dane, while feeling like a character, also feels human enough to where you're just like, okay, like maybe he's finally coming. Oh no, you still suck. He's able to just give you that. He's had some personal growth. He learned his lesson. No, he didn't.
No. Yeah, I ran him by a friend of mine who was in the military, and he said, "Yep, everybody has a Dane in their life, especially in the military, who you would never, ever, ever go out to drinks with, but you trust him in a fight. Yeah, he's the guy you want next to you holding the gun, but you do not want to associate with him any other time because they exist. But you can't get rid of them because you need those hard noses on the front line to do the dirty work. Yeah." Mm-hmm. To be the Abercrombie character.
Oh, geez. So how much of your own personal life kind of informs on your writing? So, like, I know you make beer. Yep. Very jealous because it's a hobby I've since let go. I've still got my equipment, but does that kind of inform on how, like, Joven does, like, needle making, and how he's like obsessive about it, and how he's like a perfectionist? Is that a little bit of a bleed through from the author to the character?
I'm not a perfectionist at all. There are a few things I'm perfectionist about. Like in my beer making, I keep pretty decent notes so that I can be loosey-goosey. So it's like with my outlining, right? I keep specific lines of things I'm trying to get to so that I can have something to live inside of. So Joven is definitely much more particular than I am. So I had to harness several other people in my lives to be Joven for sure. Yeah.
Fair enough.
If there's any character I'm most like, it's the person who was absolutely my Mary Sue. My Gary Sue was Rawl before Rawl became Ralia.
Oh, okay.
So if you go back to 2010, the main character was Rawl, and he was just a straight up stand-in for me, and it was bad. No character whatsoever. He was just really awesome at everything. Oh, so bad. And so I took him back seat and made him the little brother, and then turn him into Ralia because I was trying to separate the Rawl from me as much as possible to allow the character to exist. Because I still need Ralia there, especially come later in the story.
Mhm.
But I needed her to have time to grow as an individual and not just as a stand-in for myself. So that was the biggest stand-in. But there are certain parts of everybody's personalities my wife will point out and say, well, that's a bit of you there in Hannah and in Jinid. Katyam's the least like me. She's the hardest to write. Because she's based on a couple other people and then has grown from there. But she's very hard for me to write because I can't draw any information about myself and put into her at all.
Okay. So you keep mentioning all of these years. You say 2010. So how long have you been working on Collation? What are kind of the origins of it? And also, we also want to talk about Thrice and the origins of that and how that came about. And do you have more series in that bearded brain pan of yours, or?
So 1995, I started writing the Collation quests, and
I was running on the playground.
What's that?
I said I was running on the playground.
You were on the playground. I was 15, so sort of playground, and it was when I look back at that. All the notes I had from that one, it was just a straight up fanfic of David Eddings. It was bad.
Okay.
And I, didn't really do anything about it. Did lots of world building during college because I was bored. So I would take notes in the middle of class and write in other languages and, everything all, the nerd teens do. And got married. That changes things, right? And we moved off to a new city, and I had an hour of time to commute each way and an hour of breaks and an hour waiting for my wife to get off work. So I had 4 hours of writing time, and I ended up writing 100,000 words of a book I thought was just it was the total shiz, and 100,000 words. And I just found it the other day, and it's as bad as I remember it.
Polish it up. Send it off to an editor. Polish it up.
Well, I did polish it up. I polished it up in 2017.
Oh, did you?
So I basically quit writing and did a bunch of game design, worked for Fantasy Flight Games, did a little bit of writing there, but was done. And then I discovered Writing Excuses in 2016 and listened through all 12 seasons while making beer. So I'd sit there and be bottling, and I'd listen to podcasts, and one straight year. And Writing Excuses always ends their episodes with, "Now you're out of excuses, now go write." Well, I had an excuse. I had the next episode. So once I got caught up with all 12 seasons, I was like, I have no more excuses. I have to write now. And that was at the beginning of 2017. And I had done some outlining and preparation for myself, but I just didn't feel ready. And then I had no more excuses, so I had to. And so Easter actually is when I started it. Easter of 2017, I wrote 180,000 words in a month and a half. Just all I did. And then polished it up over the summer and started going after agents and never got a bite, and worked on it for a year, and then ended up, I think at that point is when it split into 2 at that point. And so it has a very long origins because I changed the book entirely and killed my darlings, which, I basically said, screw the plot. It's just terrible. I need to change some things. And I started separating characters out from each other. All of a sudden the story flourished. So originally it was like Rawl, Soraya, and Jinid were just traveling, and he was a paladin and she was a monk, and he was this guy who could fight anything because he was just the best, raised by elves, and and they were just traveling. Nothing happens. Yeah, I know. That's why I changed it. And so when I re-outlined, I pulled Jinnit out entirely and said he's gonna have his own story. And all of a sudden, he had this character. He was basically a watered down version of Dane. To start, so he had lessons to learn about not being a chauvinist and blah 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 blah. And once he was pulled out of that story and given his own story, all of a sudden he knew what he was doing, but he also had faults. He had a background or a backstory, and he just straight up worked. And I love writing Jinnit more than anybody else because he just his story flows like crazy.
He's one of my favorites.
I love Jinnit. But I still relate to Hannon and Ralia because they're also parts of me too. So that's the origin of Collation, and even the maps go back way all the way to the beginning. But not a lot has changed world-wise. It's just a matter of how the plot changed. Thrice, on the other hand, was me saying I need to do something new, and I need to do something where I do almost no planning whatsoever, and I'm going to start in 3 weeks. And I just said, okay, I need to write a book. It's going to be, unless like some people are writing, and no one's really doing a whole lot in Slavic fantasy. They've always existed. There's always been stories that are Russian inspired, but it's never been a massive subgenre. I'm like, this could be a subgenre in a year or two. I'm going to write in it. And so I said, okay, it's Slavic fantasy, and he's a needle maker, and he's not the chosen one. And I want to tell this from the point of view of Burrich, instead of from Fitz, right? And so I said, I'm going to tell the story of Fitz from the story of Burrich. Burrich is the main character, and then I wrote a story, and wrote that over a winter. So there's a lot less world building in that. Interview. What's that?
I said I didn't know that information prior to this interview. That makes me happy.
Yeah. And I kept it really small too, right? The whole map is only about the size of, it basically is the Iberian, or not the Iberian Peninsula, the Crimean Peninsula in Russia. So it's a very small area. And you're like, well, but how can you put mountains there? Well, because Wales has that many mountains, and it's only 100 miles by 50 miles wide. So it can be done. We can do a whole fantasy there. After all, Arthur takes place in Wales. So I know I'm going to do this, but I'm going to limit myself so it's not me world hopping and running around a giant continent like I always do. I needed, always do one other story. And then I needed something where I wanted small and where they travel 25 miles. Well, how long does that take? A couple days. Like, not weeks? No, a couple days. They'll be there. And so by limiting myself, it gave me more room to be more.
Okay. I mean, it also makes it a little bit more realistic because, and it also, that book starts off with a mystery because when they start traveling, they have no idea why. They just know trouble's on the way. We need to get out of Dodge, and hopefully we'll figure it out along the way.
Yeah.
And like people keep showing up on him, and he's just like, "Hey, what's the deal? Why are you following me?"
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to subvert that trope too, that there's no call to action. He's never told to go through the gate. He's told there's the gate.
Yeah,
and it's
they
shutting
basically
behind
hand
you.
him Leaf, and we're like, "Hey, this is your charge. Take care
keep
of
it alive."
Yeah, keep it alive. And
yeah,
he's just like,
yeah. And this was before Mandalorian came out. So part of I think the issue that happened when I was trying to pitch to traditional is it was right as The Witcher was coming out. And so like I actually was in a pitch session with Brandon Sanderson, and he was just listening to pitches and judging them so you could fix them up for pitching out to agents. And he goes, "Oh, this kind of sounds a lot like The Witcher." And I didn't know what The Witcher was at the time. And I'm like, "Oh, cool. I'll look that up." And it's coming out in 3 months. I'm like, oh. And so nobody wanted to touch my book because after all, it's too late and it takes 3 years to do anything in traditional publishing. So why bother trying? Mm-hmm. So I knew it was like The Witcher. And so like, you know what, maybe I'll start working towards independent publishing. And then Mandalorian came out, and I had to change a whole scene with Leaf in that book because of exactly what Grogu did in the last episode of Mandalorian. So I had to rewrite a whole scene because it was like, man, I'm getting ripped off here. It was just one scene, fortunately, but there's a lot of correlatives.
By Witcher, you mean the TV show, right?
The TV show, yeah.
Okay, I was about to say, I was like, I could have sworn the Witcher books were older than that.
That's true. No, they actually started coming out in I think 1993. I think.
Okay, I thought it was an
older.
But
the show was coming out, like... and so people. I was like, hey, let's piggyback then. Let's sell this thing, and people who want Witcher will like my book. And they're like, no, it comes out in 3 months. I'm like, oh well. So
I'm of the opinion that I don't like The Witcher.
I don't actually either. But
I was a video game fan of The Witcher
Yeah.
back in Witcher 2. And I played Assassin of Kings. And then I loved Wild Hunt. So when the show got announced, I decided to go and pick up the books. And I like the first one because it's a retelling. It's a retelling. The short story compilation is a Grimm fairy tales retelling. That's exactly what the first Witcher book is. And I love that. And then it just, from Blood of Elves on, it just slowly gets worse and worse and worse for me. So I'm glad it doesn't read like The Witcher, because otherwise we probably wouldn't be having this conversation.
nor would Leaf be alive.
Yeah, there's something. I mean, one of my unpopular opinions, whether you love the Witcher or not, like I love Geralt as the character of The Witcher. The way that the politics works within the Witcher world, it's all balls and witches and gratuitous sex and things of that nature. And I didn't feel like it needed it. Like, if you're gonna give me a series about a Witcher or a monster hunting dude, let's go slay some monsters. I don't want to walk down the road for the whole book. Which one of the books is literally them walking down the road. They're just traveling through the woods. And I'm just like, why? And then there's like a battle at the end. I don't know. Maybe. But I don't
Wasted opportunities.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff with that series. I'm wondering if Melissa's yelling at me because I don't like the Witcher books.
I think so.
And if so, Melissa, I am sorry.
I read the prologue of book 1 and was like, nope.
Prologue of Blood of Elves?
Yeah.
Okay, because the first 2 short story collections are actually fairly good, in my opinion. But then, like,
it's okay. The world is we have a short time on Earth to read all these books. We got to get in what we want to read.
Yeah. So, we have covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else we want to talk about?
I want to have Andrew put on public record his promise of Minotaurs and Centaurs in the future.
Yeah, I can give you that.
Where's he going?
I don't know. We lost the author.
Come back. It's not an author interview without the author.
I'm coming.
Then it's 2 friends standing.
Wizard, how's the weather over there?
You know what? It's actually not too bad. I got to clean the leaves on my front lawn, though.
Lucky. I don't have leaves on my front lawn anymore. I have snow.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't have that. Hey! Is that hand drawn?
Yep. And then just for these are already in the book, but here's a Vul.
Oh.
I'm so excited.
You only have to wait 1 chapter, Tori.
In Deathless?
Yeah, for a Vul. Yeah.
Yeah. They're so it's funny because it sounded like I was about to wrap things up, but now I've got things I want to talk about. When you do fantasy creatures, like you're like, oh hey, here's a fantasy creature, and then they just start interacting with it, which goes back to what you say earlier. These are just people existing in, like, this is every day for these people, of just like, oh, there's that rude freaking creature and it's gonna jump me again. But yeah, so I had yes, there are fantasy creatures all throughout the series.
I made a huge shift a couple years ago where I was like, I had humans and I had my Hurlgrins, which are like my babies for my race that I invented when I was 15, and I've always had them in, and everything else were traditional, like, but there's elves and there's dwarves, and I was like, okay, cool, but why do I have Hurlgrins? Are they orcs? Well, not really, but sort of. They're more like Ninja Turtles. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to remove everything but humans. So I pulled the elves out and changed them out with Kavili, and then started figuring out, well, but how are they not just not elves? And so what's their biology? Started changing that. And that snowballed just like that, that timeline. And I was like, you know what? Okay, fine. There's no dogs or cats or horses or bulls. And I just pulled every animal in the world out and just replaced it with all mythological. And I could have invented a bunch of my own. But I was like, you know what? No, we're gonna make it as though we flipped our world and said instead of dogs, there's fox pangolins, and instead of cats, there's manticores, and instead of, you know, horses, it's all six-legged Sleipnirs, and so it's just switching everybody out. Instead of birds, there's griffins, and then that filled my biome out, and now I have a world that just feels. And I could have. I don't explain a whole lot. I'm not Malazan, but I try not to explain like here is what a six-winged Alarin looks like, and then go into like a page on what it looks like, and a Tolkien might. But I don't want to do that. It's like, nope, it's an Alarin. Well, what's an Alarin? It's an Alarin. And honestly, that's what Sanderson does in Roshar. He didn't explain what an Axehound was for 2 books. Right. Well, he had petting the Axehounds. Then you start seeing them, you're like, who the heck would have that as a pet? Well, no, I love my Axehounds. And I'm like, yeah, but I want my fluffy dogs.
Yeah.
So
I love that too, because it's I don't think a lot of authors take that approach where you include the reader as like, you want to be dropped into a completely self-sufficient world. That's what that looks like. They don't know what a dog is because they don't have one, Yep. So I think in the end, if you want that, like that truly immersive experience, that's how you do it, because it feels completely real to do it that way.
And then Chris wants to know, did you already discuss your writing routine? How many drafts do you write, which we didn't cover?
Yeah.
And before you let other eyes review your books.
Yeah. So I write in the mornings I try to wake up at 5, but let's be honest, it's more like 6. And I'll write for 2 to 3 hours in the morning if I'm drafting. And then if I'm really, really drafting, I'm writing about 1,200 words an hour. And so I can write a 3,000 word chapter in a day. And if I only write 2,000 words, chances are I'll finish it that night. So I pretty much will try to hit a whole chapter out over the course of a day. And I will, by doing that, write a book in about a month, 2 months. And then it's my first draft. And then I can spend a little time polishing that, which basically just means me reading through it one more time and going, oh, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I have a couple of alpha readers that I pass off just to make sure I've hit the nail on the head. And I give them about 2 weeks to a month because they're very fast readers. That gives me a month to take a breath and not think about the book, even though I'm obsessing about it. Comes back to me and I spend a month polishing it, and then I push it back out again. To beta readers for 2 to 3 months so that they have time to take their time and read it. And then it comes back again and I do one more polish before it goes off to edit. And that's before I do audiobooks. I have about a 9 to 11 month process per book, but I work on like 3 books at a time. So that I'm not doing nothing, but I'm also not obsessing about one book, or I would never get anything done then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Troy is saying that you're making him realize he's just a slow writer.
We're all at our own speed. You write yourself. That's most important.
So how much of that? How much of like your writing philosophy stems from that podcast that you used to listen to, the 12 seasons? Like how much has that informed on how you write now?
It did enough so that like I don't listen to writing excuses anymore because I feel like I'm just hearing the same thing that I was hearing, because podcasts have to eventually recover the same ground. Right. And so a lot of that, I think there was a whole series on discovering yourself, discovering who you are, know thyself. And I spent the first 6 months of 2017 discovering myself. I wrote like 5 or 6 short stories, including the one I give out for free with my newsletter. And they're 7,000 words each. I knew that's what the length I wanted to be was. And I figured out that, okay, my beats are 1,000 words. So I figured out what my pace was and how much I could write in a day. And I've just allowed that to continue to be who I am as a writer from here out.
Okay. So, people always like to talk about Stephen King on writing. Do you write every single day? Like, do you make sure to sit down and write every day, or just when you
wish I could. If I'm doing audiobook or editing, I like to think I can focus on writing too, but I usually can't.
Stephen King rarely, I don't say never, but rarely does his own audiobooks, because Needful Things was
Exactly.
King.
Yeah. And but it's more important that you set yourself a low achievable goal than it is that you get out tons of words, because by setting yourself a low goal, you know about the 80% rule.
Mm-mm.
They talk about with runners. So if they tell a runner, run as fast a mile as you can, and they'll run their whatever it's supposed to be, like 6-minute mile or whatever the average is. I don't know. I'm not a sportser. And okay, so they 6-minute mile, and then the coach will say, okay, great, cool down. We're gonna have you run it again in about 10 minutes, but I want you to run it at 80% your speed. And that runner will then do a 4-minute mile, because they push themselves, but will also second guess themselves that they're trying to run what they think is all out. But if you run at 80%, you're saying, I think this is my 80. I think this is my 80. And it will actually make you go faster, because you know you're not at 100. You're only at 80. And it actually pushes you to your normal 120%. So same thing with writing. I don't say I need to write 3,000 words. I say I need to write at minimum, because I'm currently drafting, 500 words a day. If it takes me 3 hours to write those 500 words, it was probably a really difficult 500 words. And at least I got past that terrible point. Other days, I'm going to say I'm going to hit 500, and it happens in half an hour, and I'm going to roll, and I'll put 2,000 more words out because, hey, I'm blowing through these. Let's go. And so, you just go. So set yourself a low goal that's achievable, that you know you can meet, so you're not discouraging yourself every single day. It's like with a diet. So,
yep.
I hate dieting. So I know you're a huge advocate for writing.
Yep.
And like, I mean, I had just offhand mentioned I had thought about writing a book. Like growing up, I wanted to be a writer.
Yeah.
And I got talked out of it by my parents. More along the lines of there's no money in it. I got that conversation.
Yeah.
Which
There's
is
not.
why I now read and review. But do you advocate for most people to write? Or at least try? Or do you advocate for, if you are interested, then do it?
Yes, I cast my seeds. Throw it out. Everybody should write. Oh, you should write. And I'll encourage you. You should write. And when someone goes, I don't know, I just don't have it in me. Great. Don't write. Read. Great. But somebody is going to need to have heard me say, just write. And they're going to be at it. But writing is hard. It's difficult, because the only person that can make you write is yourself.
Right.
So if you, I don't have time. You're right. You don't have time because you haven't prioritized it. If you really want to, and now it's kind of trite to say, if you really wanted to write, you'd write. It's like, that's actually true. If you really wanted to write, you would write. If you, no, I would rather watch Lord of the Rings tonight. Great. I want to go watch Lord of the Rings. And there's times I'm going to do that. I paint miniatures. No, I'd rather paint my miniatures because I need to not think tonight. Great. Go paint your miniatures. Once, go work out. I worked out last Nano enough that I was writing enough for 20 days straight that my habit was built, and I was then able to exit and leave flow state on command for the next 6 months, because I could have a day off. Just like when you're working out, which I don't do either, but I know it's a good analogy. And you can work out, but until you've done it for 20 straight days, then you can't skip those first 20 days. You got to do it, or you will lose it. But once you've done 20 days, you can skip a day here or there. Your body's now in peak condition. You're going to keep going. So you got to put the time in to write. But if you don't care, don't do it. Read. I'll take your money. You can read my books. That's fine. It's a win-win. Do you want to write? And is it because I want to write because I can't find any good books? They're all terrible. It's like, probably not. You're just not asking Andrew. Talk to Andrew Wizard League. He'll tell you what book you need to read, because I don't know anybody better who can match a book than you.
I've got plenty.
Not every book is for you. I quit fantasy back in 2010 because nothing was any good. And I was like, well, okay, I'll try these other things people are talking about, like Forgotten Realms. And I crack a book open and go, nope, not happening. And then someone handed me Mistborn, and I was like, okay, now I'm back in, because it was totally fresh at the time. Yeah. And but it's just because someone needed to match me with a book. So if you can't write and you can't find books that are good, just ask somebody in the community, and they're going to find you a book.
Yeah.
Oh, I get recommendations from people all the time, especially during burnout, which, I mean, I've read 200 books in the last year. And
that's on burnout. No.
while burnt out. Like,
Yeah.
I would say for 50 of those books I read while completely burnt out. I don't recommend it, but I highly don't recommend it.
Yeah.
Reading is supposed to be enjoyable.
Yeah.
Read for pleasure. That's my message to the people.
And you should write for pleasure.
Yeah.
It's funny, while you were talking, you said that nobody's gonna make you write, and I was just picturing a personal trainer, just like, give me 500 more words, you maggot. Get back down there. You click those keys. Like,
hey, AR will do that for you if you want him to.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. You know what? AR is local to me.
Yep.
So he totally. AR is actually mad at me because I pestered him into getting back into writing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because I love Legend of Blackjack so much, I was just like, "Hey, I need more," and he was just like, "Oh yeah."
Yep. And now it's coming out in a month.
I'm so excited! I cannot wait.
Yeah.
And I did not know Sparrow Springs was the one, because he just said Sarah. He said Sarah's the one who did the art, and I was like, "Oh, cool! It's Sarah." I don't know who Sarah is, but I do know who Sparrow Springs is.
Yeah. Well, it's like saying Andy, right? There's so many Andrews in our group, in our community now.
Oh, it's hilarious. Whenever Tori does a live, it's just like 3 or 4 Andrews just pop in.
Yeah.
It's a gaggle of Andrews.
Yep.
Yeah. I can't talk to Ben about, I'm like, so this thing happened on BookTube and Andrew said this, and he's like,
which one?
Which one?
Of the like list.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, I will plug my best friend a little bit, and just like, I'm so intensely proud of her. I can't handle it. I've been watching her work on her art for 20 years, and it's
not easy.
No, she's worked so hard, and she's incredible, and I'm just so proud of her. So that's
my associates is in graphic design.
Nice.
So I understand.
Nice. Yeah. So, but yeah, I think another thing with kind of piggybacking on what Andrew said, really quickly, is that I think a lot of people, like when I talk to people and they like, oh, you write books, Andrew, you've had that conversation, I'm sure, a million times too. Oh, you write books, that's so cool. And like, I wish I could write a book. And that whole like, step-by-step conversation, people seem to have the idea that writing is a linear process. And I think Andrew describing his process of getting to what we have as Deathless Beast now is a beautiful example of how non-linear writing actually is. And getting to a point where, you wrote your first book and you're so excited and that's awesome. And now you have to kill all your darlings because it doesn't work. Like, it's a process to learn how to, not take yourself too seriously, and to find a village of people that will support and encourage you and like believe in you when you're low and you're like, I should never write a book again in my life. So yeah, I mean, it's a process for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, again, I have all the links to Andrew's books in the description down below. I also, again, have the link. Oh, you got a D20?
Yeah, we got to roll for this giveaway.
Okay. Well, let me finish my statement before we roll for the giveaway. If you're still here, there's a giveaway. Please make sure you are checking out Tori from Tori Talks. I do have her channel linked in the description box down below. She deserves to have a much larger channel than she does. Okay, now roll your D20. Let the dice gods decide.
I got my list of people who signed up for my newsletter over the last few weeks. I'm going to roll the dice and see who gets a free copy of both Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud signed and mailed out to them. 13, one of my favorite numbers. And that is Jared Lays.
All right.
Hey.
So, Jared, if you're on here or not, I'll find you anyway. You just won a copy of both books. It's coming your way.
Woot. Congratulations. And again, guys, fantastic books. I'm going to hold them all up because I like to have paper in hand. Please check these out. Andrew is not only a fantastic guy, a good friend, but a great author. I love your Slavic fantasy books that have a great classic feel, but are still very accessible. Please, 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 please check these out. And support local bookstores by buying them from Silverstone's books.
Yes.
That said, guys, that's really all I've got here for you today. Please, please stay magical and enjoy reading. Till next time, guys. Bye.